Because when you play all the way to the whistle, there's no reason to worry about the clock. You know you won't stop until it's over, that every second available is yours to use. So temporary setbacks aren't discouraging, they are just bumps along a road that you intend to travel all the way down. That is persistence defined to me, where you're not even waiting for the whistle. Fuck that. You are basically going, I'm going down this road, almost no matter what. Welcome back, mere mortal lights, to another book learnings session. And I'm going to go over one that you have heard me talk about a few years back, if you're familiar to this channel. If not, stay tuned because this is going to be a real fun one. I'm going to be talking about The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. I have done a book review a little while ago on this channel already. So, of course, if you want to go and have a bit of a look around what I thought with that, go back, take a listen as always, and then come back, because what I want to be doing is a learnings session from these books. Something that I started doing a few months back, which is in my books, when I was doing my reviews, I was in essence going through what the book was about, the synopsis, the themes, my takeaways, and that'll always have a place for it. But I've actually found a lot of the other things that I just generally do, which is documenting the learnings, taking away the recommendations, the things that I care about. That is what I want to be talking about in this particular book learning session. So if I hold this up to the camera and I'll kind of describe what I do. Once again, I try and tab all of the key places that I guess I would call out are the learnings from a particular book. I've been doing this now for maybe there's 13 books that I've done so far that I've got these sort of learning tabs through it. Why? I don't want to go and write directly on the book. I feel like that's sacrilege. I do purchase all of my books as opposed to, say, renting them out from the library. But even then, I do sometimes pass them on to other people. I don't want to go and write them on it. So tabbed it is. And I try and put a few notes. For The Obstacle is the Way for Ryan Holiday. This is where it all began, right back in 2015 when this one was particularly released. It's now a full series. The reason why I'm doing this, and you'll go and see a lot of the learnings coming up, I'm going through and rereading all of the Ryan Holiday books up until the very latest ones that have started to come out, in particular to the Stoicism and Virtue series. Again, I found a terrific amount of learnings from them previously. I then documented in the way that I've been doing it now, as I'm going to be redoing that very, very quickly through those books, and also just replaying it back for content in case that it's any learnings that people want to take away. In any case, enough blabbing about it. There are 14 key learning pieces that I called out here in this particular book. In no particular order, let's go basically left to right on these particular books. Once again, if you want to know what the book is about, although Obstacle is the Way is a pretty well-known book, go back to the book review, I guess I did on it to be able to find out more. But here I'm talking about the general learnings or the real key call-outs or really interesting things that you can pull out from this book. Now, the very first one I've got here, I noted it down, the origin of the premise. And again, I'm just holding out here so you can see the way that I actually tabulate that. The origin of the premise is the first learning or the first key call out that I took away right at the beginning in the preface of this book. Ryan talks about the comment from from Marcus Aurelius, and he refers to a ton load of the old Stoic philosophers, Marcus, Chrysippus, Zeno, Cleanthes, Aristotle, Epictetus, plenty. The Marcus is probably one of the predominant ones that Ryan leverages in terms of the information and the sources. When I first read this book, I hadn't read Meditations. Now I've read Meditations, and I stumbled upon a few of the items that he calls out here in this particular book. But once again, it's nice to see it defined and summarized in books like Ryan Holiday's as opposed to getting it from the source. Honestly, that's just me. But I wanted to read this piece here that Ryan calls out. So this is around Marcus Aurelius. But in a scant 85 words, Marcus Aurelius so clearly defined and articulated a timeless idea that he eclipses the great names of those who came before him. And then lots of names. It is more than enough for us. Our actions may be impeded, but there can be no impeding our intentions or dispositions, because we can accommodate and adapt. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. And then conclude with the powerful words, destined for maxim: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And again, my little note there is that it's kind of like the origin of this particular premise. Literally, the obstacle is the way comes from that Marx Aurelius sort of statement of what stands in the way is what becomes the way. The obstacle is the way. And again, it's nice to see in books like this how clearly articulated it is. Again, it's pulling from really, the original source, and you can go and read the original source to get all of this good information. The really good authors, and who knows in the future what that might look like with technology and the like, but they can extract this great, meaningful, right to the point that you don't have to go and find it in those various pages. And of course, Ryan does that throughout this particular book for learnings. But for me, it was interesting to see where the name of the obstacle is the way came from, where those sort of key call-outs came out from Meditations, from Marcus Aurelius, and the way that it was stated here from Marx himself. Whatever you want to think about that particular 2 sentences there, but very clear. What stands in the way becomes the way. The obstacle is the way. And the whole premise of the book is, hey, there's going to be obstacles, and it's getting through those obstacles and pursuing the obstacles, the action, the execution that actually gets you to the way to what you want to do. Something that I've been hearing more recently as well is, everyone wants the outcome, everyone wants the price, but no one wants to pay the price. No one wants to pay what it actually takes to get there. So there's the obstacles that you got to get through. So that was the very first literally the first page. So I was like, dang, learning, amazing. Second one. So this is on, I'm going to call out the exact page as well, just in case people refer to it later. Page 4 in the introduction section. And this is just around stating your self-worth. Little comment here. Let's be honest, most of the time we don't find ourselves in horrible situations which we must simply endure. Rather, we face some minor disadvantages or get stuck with some less than favorable conditions, or we're trying to do something really hard and find ourselves outmatched, overstretched, or out of ideas. Well, the same logic applies. Turn it around, find some benefit, use it as fuel. It's simple, but of course, not easy. Now, I kind of summarize it back, and I guess when I was sort of reading this and then down, it's the also stating your self-worth, helping out the endurance, it being simple, but of course not easy. There was a whole encapsulation of this, for me at least, on what it means for self-worth rather than the external pushing for obstacles. Enduring, I think this is more to get that correct, to do it right. It should be intrinsically driven by a self-worth of you being able to get through whatever comes around, as opposed from the external acknowledgement or push that you might need. And that summarized, or at least I noted that there. That's my little call out. Third one, page 6, still in the introduction. So this is some hardcore reinforcement. So let me hardcore reinforce us here at Mere Mortalites. This is in relation to just the way of words or the language that one uses. I'll go from here. To will yourself to see that this must be good, an opportunity to gain a new foothold, move forward, or go in a better direction. Not be positive, but learn to be ceaselessly, creative and opportunistic. Not, this is not so bad, but I can make this good. Because it can be done. In fact, it has and is being done every day. That's the power we will unlock in this book, but also it's in the way that you unlock that via the words that you use, what you think, what you actually go and act. And it's a hardcore reinforcement of looking at things very clearly stated. Don't look at them as this is not so bad, right? It's not just the view of this is not so bad, even though it is bad, right? So don't deny reality. It's I can make this good. Again, it's not to say don't deny the suffering that might come from becoming better at being a soccer player or reading better. Again, if you don't know how to read, if you're an adult and struggle to read, it's not around looking at it, this is going to be easy. It's a rather know full well there's going to be some difficulties, obstacles there, and it's through those obstacles that you're going to get to the outcome that you actually are wanting to get to. So that was the third one there. Moving right on ahead to the fourth, 9th page, still in the introduction. This is the 3 parts to overcome, which is the way through them. And again, this is the obstacles, and it's the framework that Ryan puts through in this particular book, which is it's 3 interdependent, interconnected, and fluidly contingent disciplines. perception, action, and will. So again, perception, action, and will. You need to be able to perceive the obstacle. And again, Ryan breaks down in this book all the various ways you could do that and always explains it via a story, which I really, really like books that do that. The two and the key thing, action, doing, not just about saying if you're going to get through the obstacle, there's some sort of energy that you got to output into the world to do something via thinking, getting someone else to go and do that, you yourself going doing that, organizing something, whatever it may be. Plenty of action that needs to come through to actually go and get past that obstacle towards where you're getting to. And then the will, and that sat more on the endurance, the eternal struggle, the ability to do it even if you're not going to get to the outcome that you're looking through. So even if you get through the obstacle and you get to the way, but you don't even achieve that for whatever reason, well, there's going to be an aspect of the will that allows you to continue on either in the immediacy or in the long-term game that you're playing there. So perception, action, and the will. That framework there was it's nice to just summarize it there in the intro. Let's go on to the next one here that I've got. So this was note I put in page 22 for recognizing your power. Right, the split between what happens plus the story. So this was a story of Laura Ingalls Wilder, author of the classic series Little House, lived that idea, facing some of the toughest and unwelcoming elements on the planet, harsh and unyielding soil, Indian territory, Kansas prairies, and the humid backwoods of Florida. Not afraid, not jaded, because she saw it all as an adventure. Everywhere was a chance to do something new, to persevere with cheery pioneer spirit, whatever fate befell her and her husband. So, little note, that isn't to say that she saw the world through delusional colored glasses. No. Instead, she simply chose to see each situation for what it could be, accompanied by hard work and a little upbeat spirit. Others make the opposite choice. As far as we face things that are not nearly as intimidating, and then we probably decide we're screwed. That is how obstacles become obstacles. So I guess it's a split between what happens, what's the reality of what goes down versus the story you either tell yourself or you reflectively tell back later. You can always look at things, and this is in the perception. You can perceive something as, be damned, nothing I can do here. This is completely very, very tough. I guess personally myself, I've been in places in my life from years ago where either like an exam or a tough situation for something I'm learning, and I've got, nah, that's the obstacle, can't get past it. But then there's been other times when, I guess in a similar way to Laura, there's been insurmountable things or plenty of things just to get through. I wouldn't say there's anything in my life that's been so ungodly ridiculous that it's worthy of calling out. But where you go, yeah, it's a cheery nature, it's a more upbeat sort of strategy that you look at something as opposed with the, oh God, this is an obstacle, that helps you move away from the split between reality and the story that then you look at it through or reflectively look back on it as well. The next note I've got here, this is the authority piece, page 28, in controlling your emotions. Now I wrote, uncertainty and fear are relieved by authority. Training is authority, it's a release valve. With enough exposure, you can adapt out those perfectly ordinary, even innate fears that are bred mostly from unfamiliarity. Fortunately, unfamiliarity is simple to fix, again, not easy, which makes it possible to increase our tolerance for stress and uncertainty. That call out of authority, that's the boot to getting rid of fear. Because a lot of times, you're fearful because you're uncertain. You don't know what's going to go happen. And it's authority here. They call, examples here. It's being training as an authority or past proof as an authority, even when you venture into something that isn't unknown. Again, probably the clearest one here is for me looking at something like fitness and the call out of training. If I have done plenty of training in a broad enough modalities, running and swimming and skiing and bodybuilding and powerlifting and strongman works, let's just say something like that, then there's going to be some authority that I possess based on previous experiences to be able to tackle uncertainty and then what would lead to fear and kind of leverage off the back of that for the authority that comes along a few of those things. How different that is to the general concept of confidence, maybe they're quite tied, but just the wording of the use of authority there, and I guess it being the release valve of moving away from the fear and uncertainty that might bottle you up. Authority can unbottle you, let you release. The next little note that I've got here, and it's so nice actually going through all these notes because there's a lot of reflective thinking in my mind going, oh, why did I actually write that? Oh, yeah, that's why it was. Page 34, talking about practice objectivity. Now, this was coming off the back of a DeMartini event that I got to go see with John DeMartini. And I actually wrote just a little note around, like DeMartini, of neutralizing method to list out all the negatives and positives. And I'll tell you why I wrote that, because at the same time, Ryan mentioned about Epictetus. And Epictetus told his students, when they'd quote some great thinker, to picture themselves observing the person having sex. It's funny, you should try it the next time someone intimidates you or makes you feel insecure. See them in mind, grunting, groaning, and awkward in the private life, just like the rest of us. Now, Marcus Aurelius had a version of this exercise where he described glamorous or expensive things without the euphemisms. Roasted meat as a dead animal and vintage wine as old fermented grapes. The aim was to see things as they really are without any of the ornamentation. So in the perception space, and again, looking at that from obstacles, it was kind of called out to me in other ways that you can do that with individuals, which is basically you think of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So let's just list a couple of people, Beyonce, Taylor Swift, people who are just out of this world, amazing in probably most mind of most individuals in terms of what they've succeeded and what they do. And you can map out as well, what are all the qualities and attributes that you map or match with them. And maybe what are all the attributes, skill sets, idealisms, everything else that perhaps you don't want. What are the negatives of them? And, list out 50 for each person, both positives and negatives, and you'll start to see a lot that you map to, and also ones that you maybe don't map to or wouldn't want to for that particular reason. I guess in the way that John's view from the DeMartini aspect is everyone holds all the various qualities within them, right? You can be sad and angry and happy and frustrated. You can also be, nihilistic and incredibly joyous. All, you can have that all within a human body. We're all mere mortals. So that other view than the way that Brian's talking about it here as well was just looking at reality. I think there's probably the underlying meta of all of these. It's looking at all of the objects with reality in mind. Again, dead meat, cloths, chemical mixture to do this. It's all looking at the reality, moving away from objectivity, moving away from the emotional bias behind it. And I guess called Practice Objectivity is the name of this particular chapter. I would go against that in some way and say, obviously not always. There are, as we are emotional creatures as humans, as mere mortals, that also make a certain joyous and spark as to who we are. If we were just all objective 100% of the time, that also would create some issues. But I guess when it comes to obstacles in particular, fantastic, right? Because you can see reality for what it is. My next note that I've got listed here down for you mere mortals, action. Literally just that. Literally just action on my notes. But why did I write action? Well, the preface of part 2 is action. As we said, it's perception, action, will. And I just liked this definition of what is action, and I thought it probably would be worth calling out. What is action? Action is commonplace. Right action is not. As a discipline, it's not any kind of action that will do, but directed action. Everything must be done in the service of the whole. Step by step, action by action, we'll dismantle the obstacle in front of us. With persistence and flexibility, we'll act in the best interest of our goals. Action requires courage, not brashness, creative application, and not brute force. I'll leave it there in that particular chapter, but a couple of things that call out to me, right? It's commonplace. Like, it's not just to say action, go and act, go and do things. Okay, let's just say 80% of people do act, fine. And 20% you're not doing anything, well, I'm not talking about you. But then of the 80% that are actually taking action, which is commonplace, this key call, right action is not, right? It's commonplace to do something, but it isn't commonplace to do the right thing. So as a discipline, it's not any kind of action that we'll do, but a directed action. It's saying to take action, but not in a way that you are delaying the thing to actually do, You can take actions by writing some notes of what you're going to present. You can take some actions by thinking about what we're going to present, by preparing and sleeping better, by talking to someone else about it. Now, all of these various things is action, for sure. But the directed action of maybe doing a presentation, is to do the presentation. That's a directed action. Now, again, aspects of it, some stuff prepares you for the actual presentation, but it is doing the actual presentation that's the really key pivotal thing to execute on that, right? That might be the obstacle that you're going to get through. Directed action is very important. So it helped me probably be a little bit more defined, not just to say to people, yeah, what's important? Oh, it's action. It's directed action. That's the really key thing. Now, within those, in this next sort of section, which is actions, this is in the discipline of actions, page 68. A little note of we dally and expect the world to right itself. Action man is what I wrote to myself. Action man. And why? Why did I write that? Well, there is a little note here from Ryan's book. This little test of character says everything about us. Now, what are you talking about? Go backwards a bit. There's an explosion, metaphoric or otherwise. Are you the guy running towards it, running away from it? Or worse, are you paralyzed and do nothing? So, what are you doing? Are you going towards the problem? Are you going away from the problem? Are you literally just paralyzed waiting for the world to do something? So that's kind of my note. Dallying around, waiting for the world to do something, right? Which kind of even worse. If you're doing that, have some sort of move where you're either moving towards it, you're moving away from it. I kind of wrote it for myself. Just don't be standing there doing nothing, right? Don't wait for 17 years to go by doing the things that I can either just do because it's easy or because I'm guided by others. And then after 17 years, I go back and kind of reflect and say, man, but what if I did this? And that kind of reflection, or that I feel an apprehension now of what would happen down the line if I was to look back and go, man, I've got some regrets. I think if you're taking actions, directed actions, or at least actions that are within your control, you minimize the amount of regrets that you can make because you make them for a particular reason. And at least you can have a conversation with yourself later. Whereas if you just paralyze and let the world take its choice, you have no leg to stand on at that point. My next note, and this is an important one, so let me be clear about it. I write here, this is what started my 3 a.m. Mondays. And yes, on Mondays, I wake up at 3 in the morning. I love it. It's been really good. The first initial transition from that sucked, but now, fantastic, wonderful. I'm already an early morning person, but this particular section is what transformed me into a 3 a.m. Monday. And it's the whole chapter, this particular chapter, which is about Amelia Reinhardt. Yes, from Get Moving. Now, this particular piece here, I'll start it from here. Right. While you're sleeping, traveling, attending meetings, or messing around online, the same thing is happening to you. You're going soft. You're not aggressive enough. You're not pressing ahead. You've got a million reasons why you can't move at a faster pace. This all makes the obstacles in your life loom very large. For some reason these days we tend to downplay the importance of aggression, of taking risks, of barreling forward. It's probably because it's been negatively associated with certain notions of violence or masculinity. And then Brian was talking about, but of course, for our heart shows that isn't true. And if you go back into the previous chapter, it talks about the actions, what she actually pushed forward to do to get into the space that she needed to be. But that particular middle line that I wrote around the barreling forward, the aggression, the taking risks, I just found, at least for me personally, and that's why I shifted me to the Monday 3 a.m. There was speed, there was movement in my mornings that I can do a lot of things quite effectively. And part of me went, as I was reading that, why don't I make a change? And that change for me looked like I'll wake up at 4 a.m. on a Monday to a 3 a.m. on a Monday. And that enabled me to do X, Y, Z. Today's a Monday right now. And I can tell you right now, I was able to do a heck of a lot of stuff earlier on in my day, smash that out, training, time with my family, to relax for lunchtime. It just unlocked a lot of things. And now is that just being a little bit more aggressive. And I guess here the term is aggressive towards my daily planning, daily discipline. And then discipline kind of extended off to waking up a little bit earlier, which also then goes back to the Sunday and making sure that I'm resting enough, sleeping enough. Next section, page 80 on practicing persistence. And this is just my note here was around, I think this is persistence defined, like kind of a definition around persistence. I'll probably say so, because he started off here with a phrase favored by Epictetus: persist and resist. Persist in your efforts, resists giving in to distraction. Yeah. discouragement, or disorder. There's no need to sweat this or feel rushed. No need to get upset or despair. They're not going anywhere. You're not going to be counted out. You're in this for the long haul. Now, the last bit around of my example, because when you play all the way to the whistle, there's no reason to worry about the clock. You know you won't stop until it's over, that every second available is yours to use. So temporary setbacks aren't discouraging. They are just bumps along a road that you intend to travel all the way down. That is persistence defined to me, where you're not even waiting for the whistle. Fuck that. You are basically going, I'm going down this road almost no matter what. I'm going to be persistent. So there is part of it. Yeah, you can resist certain things, and that kind of plays out to me more of like the shorter term, right? Something happens and you got to resist it. But persistence is, I'll call out this podcast, right? So, over 5 years now that we've been doing this podcast. When you're listening to this, I don't know what time in the timeline of the Mere Mortals podcast I would look like. But for me, the persistence is I'm going to be doing this and setting up some things around it. I'll call it in another way, long-term games. There are some long-term games that I'm playing and setting up procedures and structures for this podcast that makes me go, yeah, I'm going to persist this for a very long time. And I'm setting myself up in that way. So I can resist both in the short term, but holy hell, there's going to be some long-term persistence to this podcast as well. And you heard it here first, Immortal Lights. The next couple of notes, getting all the way a little bit towards the back end of the book, page 123, this is in Preparing for None of It to Work chapter. And action in its own right is the focus, is my little note here. And this is now not too dissimilar from some of the other notes that I've been talking about, as you will see. But it's a quote from Seneca. In the meantime, cling tooth and nail to the following rule: not to give in to adversity, not to trust prosperity, and always take full note of fortune's habit of behaving just as she pleases. And yeah, he goes on and starts talking about it for preparing for none of it to work. Run it through in your head like this: nothing can ever prevent us from trying, ever. All creativity and dedication aside, after we've tried, some obstacles may turn out to be impossible to overcome. Just happens. Some actions are rendered impossible, some path impassable. Some things are bigger than us. So action in its own right is the focus, or is the way. And that goes back to kind of another underlying sort of note around this is there are going to come upon obstacles. And what you want to really focus in on is, what is the directed action that I can take to go and do this, to progress past that. That, maybe in another word, is the journey. That is the journey that you want to go through. That is where you find the other learnings, the important pieces of life. And even then, if you don't achieve what you're looking to do, hopefully you do, right? If it's an obstacle for me to get to being the 7th fastest person in Australia, okay, I really hope that you can get past this. But if you go down the path of directed action, you take that journey and you don't, within that particular journey, right? That's some of the great value that you're going to get from it anyways. So prepare for none of that to work anyways, because it's in ensuing and pursuing that is the joy, that is the value that comes from it. And another fact is when you do achieve something, let's just say I would never release this goal for the podcast, but if I set a goal for the podcast, we're going to be the best podcast there is out there. And if we didn't achieve it, well, again, be prepared for none of it to work. But if we did achieve it, I'd still go, eventually the outcome that we got to that point wouldn't be as joyous or as fulfilling as the effort of the journey and the directed action that it took to get there. The next one, I want to persevere. That's literally my note for the next one here. And it's in the chapter of perseverance. Is all around the will to actually do it. Starts off perseverance with the note from Winston Churchill, but it's also a note here of this historical context. Odysseus leaves Troy after 10 long years of war destined for Ithaca for home. If only he knew what was ahead of him. 10 more years of travel. Then he'd come so close to the shores of his homeland, his queen and young son, only to be blown back again. Then he'd face storms, temptations, or cyclops, deadly whirlpools, a 6-headed monster, or that he'd be held captive for 7 years and suffer the wrath of Poseidon. And of course, that back in Ithaca, his rivals were circling, trying to take his kingdom and his wife. How did he get through it? How did the hero make it home despite it all? Creativity, of course, and craftiness and leadership and discipline and courage, but above all, perseverance. And then more stories as Ryan sort of sets up some of these structures of the chapters. But as I read that, and he quotes a couple of other things: craftiness, leadership, discipline, courage. Above all, perseverance. We talked about it already. And one of the key learnings that I pull out from this particular book is the will aspects. So obviously directed action and everything that comes along for that is important. The perception, the ability to view and see objectively some of the obstacles that are coming up. But it was, man, if you want to play the long-term games and you want to do it well, attach yourself to the things that you care about and persevere until you can't persevere anymore, which is aka you're dead, or you just start focusing on something else because priorities change, right? But I want to persevere. Perseverance. That was cracking learning, and I guess a lot of notes that came out of that from this particular book. I think probably a lot of people who read this will take that away, right? And the last note that I took here, page 161, something bigger than yourself. And my little quote here is, make it great, but remember your place and soul. And so this was off the back of another quote from Leroy Percy. A man's job is to make the world a better place to live in, so far as he is able, always remembering the results will be infinitesimal, and to attend to his own soul. So make it great, always make it great. Aim for something fantastic. Aim for improving the lives of not yourself, but everyone else around you, with your just your family, maybe your friends, maybe the whole world. Maybe you want to just increase life joy and some other terminology around it. But also remember, at the end of the day, the change and the shift that you might make, it's going to be pretty fractional in where you live, the timeline that you're in, everything else. So attend to your own soul. Something bigger than yourself. This particular chapter was really just talking about aim for something bigger than yourself and never forget it. You also have to look after your own self, because in the whole timeline of the scheme of life, there's also you, and you're pretty important to yourself. Those were all the learnings that I took away from Ryan Holiday. If I really had to boil it down, directed action and perseverance. Directed action and perseverance. Those were the key things around obstacles I kind of really pull out, and you find it in a lot of the stories that get discussed in here. I think the key things with books like this and learnings is, now I've talked about a lot of the learnings, a lot of the highlights through here. At least for me, now twice I've read this book, I find that I attach a lot of what I just said there to the stories that are told by Ryan. So my recommendation when reading some of these books and taking away learnings is read them and map them back to that historical context of the story, because as we very well know, we can take away learnings, quotes, sentences, words, the way things are described, but when they're told in a story or absorbed through a story, you both, one, remember it a lot more, but two, you feel a whole lot more connected to how that's actually been done as well, so you can replicate it for yourself, whatever that may be. Immortal Lights, I'll leave it there. That has been my learning for The Obstacles the Way by Ryan Holiday. Goddamn love this book. Almost becoming one of my top books, but not yet the best. The Immortal Lights, one out.